Let's talk about entering the dream time. There have been a myriad variety of rituals that have been used across the eons, but by cultures, so many cultures I can't even count them, to intentionally induce the brainwaves frequencies that allow us to enter the dream time and perceive the spirit world. Now, some people are naturally adept at that. I'm sure a number of you are highly intuitive and maybe naturally slip in and out of those states. Okay. If you weren't interested or potentially highly already intuitive, you probably wouldn't be on this call right now. Okay. There are specific methods, though, that allow us to refine those natural gifts. Some people, as I said, are more naturally adept at this skill than others, but everybody can learn it. All people can learn it. We don't need to be constrained by any given method or ritual, regardless of the custom dogma or current popularity. Okay, there's many ways to enter the state. What I'm going to teach you is one way that I find safe and highly effective. Okay, and learning to enter the dream time safely and effectively is the first and most fundamental step in learning shamanic spirit medicine. So let's talk about shamanic consciousness. Shamanic consciousness is a specific state of consciousness that's achieved when one enters the dream time to access spirit reality for a specific purpose. Shamanic consciousness is like lucid dreaming, but more easily accessible because we enter and leave shamanic consciousness at will during our waking hours. So it's something we do consciously. We use our logic mind to make the choice to go there. It's not something that happens accidentally to us. It's something that we choose. So we act to do it rather than it happening to us. And that gives us a lot of agency. And agency is important when we're working with spiritual development and growth. We never want to give up our agency. We never want to give up our free will. We want to always maintain our own ability to choose our own path of right relationship. We don't want to give that up to anybody else. We don't want any intermediaries. Okay. Another distinction between shamanic consciousness and lucid dreaming is that when we purposefully enter shamanic consciousness, we do actually have far greater agency to act in alignment with our stated intent. In a lucid dream, we may know that we're dreaming, but we're often very limited in the degree to which we can control our actions and perform our conscious intentions within our dreams. Shamanic consciousness allows us the freedom to command our dreaming and to receive healing and guidance in accordance with specific, clarified intent. Shamanic consciousness gives us the agency to control our actions to the same degree as we control our actions in normal waking conscious reality, except we're doing that in spirit reality. So how cool is that? You're in a dream and you have the same amount of agency and conscious control over your own actions as you do in regular waking life. That's amazing. Okay, because that allows us the ability to reprogram ourselves for a deep level of healing on a limbic system level that can't be done through affirmations or things like that. In neither lucid dreaming nor shamanic consciousness do we control the actions of others. We're not able to. And this is what distinguishes these states of perception from fantasy. Okay, in a fantasy or a daydream, we control both our own actions and the actions of the other beings that we imagine in our creation. That's very different than shamanic consciousness or lucid dreaming. We're not creating what's out there. We're perceiving what's out there in a different state of consciousness. That's very different than having a fantasy where we're creating everything. Trust me, when you meet your power animals and they straighten you out about where you may be acting in a way that you think you're doing everything great, and then your power animal goes, "Oh no, Scott, you were in the wrong there." First of all, it's humbling, and second of all, it's not a fantasy. That's not your fantasy, right? Your fantasy isn't to be told, "Hey, you're out of line, boy." Okay, that's not my fantasy. Maybe it's somebody else's. It's certainly not mine. Okay. So this happens to everybody. Okay, we go through this process at first because we've been so conditioned to deny this other part of our existence. right? Our logic mind is so dominant in Western society, in modern society. Our logic minds are so dominant that when we have experiences of our spirit mind, our logic mind immediately tries to rationalize them and take control of them again. But when we shut that down and we're able to silence the internal dialogue and quiet the logic mind, then we can actually access spiritual awareness. So it's normal at times for people to have self-doubt around, am I making this up? Right? You're only making it up if you're thinking. Okay? That's when it becomes a fantasy, when you start thinking about it. Fantasies are logic mind creations. They're not spirit mind creations. Okay? In a shamanic journey, what we're perceiving are aspects of reality that already exist, regardless of whether we observe them or not. Okay? We're not creating those aspects of reality, and we certainly don't control them. Okay? So you guys, from all over the world here on this call. Okay, I can't open your door and look outside and see what's there, but it's still there. Okay, I'm not creating it, but if I saw it, I wouldn't be creating it. It's the same thing in the spirit world. If I were to travel in the spirit world and to observe what was happening in the spirit world around you, I wouldn't be creating that. I would just be observing what's there. The same as if I flew over to where you were and took a look through my physical eyes. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? How we distinguish? Okay, great. So inducing shamanic consciousness. How do we get there? How do we silence the logic thinking mind, silence the internal dialogue, and shift into shamanic consciousness? So shamanic consciousness can be induced voluntarily through various techniques. Shamans and apprentices across cultures and the ages have used the following methods to effectively induce shamanic consciousness, and other ones, but these are some of the most common ones. Drumming or other musical instruments to induce a rhythmic trance. So that could be a drum, it could be the yadaki, which is the didgeridoo, it could be a flute, it could be a singing bowl, it could be clapsticks, it could be a rattle, it could be chanting. Okay, so it's basically rhythmic entrainment. Fasting, sweat lodge or nipi, entheogenic preparations, meditation, and combinations of the above. So for example, traditionally, you might fast for a couple of days and go into a sweat lodge where there's drumming and meditation, and some people might even ingest certain plants in order to help induce those states. None of that you don't have to do that. Okay, you don't have to ingest any psychotropic substances in order to induce a shamanic consciousness state. It is just one of the ways that it has been done over time through some cultures. Most cultures don't actually use plants or psychoactive plants to do that. Most cultures use some form of drum or musical trance and meditation. Okay. Or fasting, like on a vision quest. Okay. To navigate the spirit world effectively with longevity and ongoing vitality and groundedness, okay, we must command our ability to enter shamanic consciousness at will and return to waking consciousness at will as easily as possible and with as little strain as possible on our physical body. So for me, drumming and meditation are the two methods which are least strenuous on our physical body. Okay, I can't imagine. I journey every day, sometimes twice a day, sometimes more than twice a day if I'm doing a number of sessions or teaching. Okay, I couldn't imagine having to take ayahuasca 3 times a day. That would just not work. Oh, sorry, I can't get my kid at school today. I'm not able to drive. Okay, so there's another way that we can apply this in modern daily life. Okay, understanding that the cultures from which some of these psychotropic substances came from where these entheogenic substances were used, were set up completely differently. Nobody had to show up at their job at 9 a.m. Monday morning under fluorescent lights. And everybody who was traditionally exposed to that had been for years raised within the culture of learning how to communicate with the spirits of the plant and working with the spirits without ingesting it for years as little kids. Okay, so that's something where, if you're interested, I wrote an article on shamanism without ayahuasca that goes into a lot more detail about that and why it's not necessarily a great match for us in modern day-to-day life. Okay, so I prefer drumming and rhythmic trance to meditation because it blocks out the distractions from the outer world and the inner world, meaning my wandering mind or the neighbor's barking dog get blocked out very easily while I'm drumming. It also energizes our trance. Now, my daughter, who has been learning shamanic journeying since she was 4 or 5 years old, would say to me, Dad, it's just so distracting when you drum. Do you have to drum? Why do you need that? I can just do it by quieting my mind, which is great. But, and I tell her, well, I wasn't raised the way you were, so I need the drum as a crutch to turn my mind, my thinking mind off. But she's able to just switch back and forth without any type of rhythmic entrainment. But I believe most human beings would be able to do that if we'd been trained that way since we were little kids.